Hi everyone, it is Damie. Since the latest wave of new phone releases started late last year, there is one trend that has become impossible to ignore. Smartphone prices are climbing again. As for the reason, besides the fact that flagship models have been pushing into the high-end market, the biggest factor is the skyrocketing cost of RAM and flash storage in the supply chain. It started by hitting the PC industry, and has now rippled through to smartphones. Take PC memory and SSDs for example. The 48GB DDR5 memory kit, 24GB *2, I bought previously, cost 759 yuan during the 2023 Double 11 sale. By September 2025, it was around 999 yuan. But if you check the price now, it has surged to about 3,100 yuan. Similarly, a 2TB SSD I bought in May 2023 cost less than 500 yuan. Around September 2025, it was roughly 800 plus. But looking at it today, the price has nearly doubled to 1,600 yuan. It is honestly ridiculous. Who would have thought that when building a PC now, the RAM would cost more than some flagship CPUs? All I can say is, if you didn't build your PC last Double 11 and plan to do it this 618, you are in for a real treat. Today, I'm going to chat with you all about how this trend will impact the smartphone industry in 2026. On the mobile side, the general consensus is that the wave of new flagships in October saw a steeper price jump from 12 plus 256GB to 16 plus 512GB than in previous years. But is it completely outrageous? Not quite yet. After all, conventional wisdom suggests that the price gap between storage tiers for flagship models is usually higher than that of mid-range phones anyway. What's truly starting to impact the entire smartphone industry and shifting the purchase decisions of tech enthusiasts is this year-end wave of mid-range phones in the 2,500 yuan price bracket. For some models, upgrading from 12 plus 256GB to 16 plus 512GB now costs an extra 900 yuan. This is a tough pill to swallow. After all, most people would think, how is the storage markup on a mid-range phone even higher than on a flagship? It's completely backwards and defies all logic. Remember, back in 2022 and 2023, when 16GB plus 1TB mid-range phones were dirt cheap, it even felt like 24GB RAM was about to become the new standard. But thinking about it rationally, with the massive price hike in RAM and flash memory, the ones who feel the cost pressure first are these low to mid-range models with thinner profit margins. On the contrary, because flagships have higher margins, they can partially absorb the cost increase within their premium pricing. This makes their price hike seem less drastic by comparison. So, in 2026, with the supply chain costs for RAM and storage soaring, the most impacted price segment is basically the 1,599 to 2,999 yuan range. And models in this specific bracket are actually the primary volume drivers for many manufacturers. No wonder recent data from research firms shows that for the 2026 smartphone market, many manufacturers have already lowered their shipment forecasts. I think, on one hand, many consumers today have a very chill or indifferent attitude toward upgrading. After all, many of the models from the past 2 years, like those with Snapdragon 8 Elite or Dimensity 9400, or even Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 and Dimensity 9300, don't really have any issues with daily fluid performance. Their theoretical performance is still more than enough. Models across different price segments, they've got pretty much all the essential specs covered. Unlike years ago, when you'd upgrade your phone, there was massive room for improvement in performance, camera, smoothness, and display. If the new models are too pricey, I'll just stick with my old one. From the manufacturer's perspective, with supply chain costs skyrocketing, if they don't raise prices for high-capacity storage versions, they'll definitely take a loss. But if the new phones are priced too high, and consumers refuse to bite, then the resulting inventory backlog becomes a huge headache. Eventually, they'll have to slash prices to clear stock. This means the hardware specs and overall product competitive edge might not be as impressive as what we saw before. That is why among the recently released mid-range phones, you'll notice some models reverting to an 8GB space RAM capacity. Others are simply scrapping the 24GB storage variants altogether. This will really test each manufacturer's ability to optimize background performance for smaller RAM. You could say that 2.5 years ago, we saw the mass adoption of 24GB physical RAM, but 2.5 years later, it is 8GB physical plus 8GB extended memory. The new 16GB era has begun. But let's be real. Given how much RAM the apps from major domestic developers hog, the background experience on an 8GB Android phone is, well, it is a bit of a nightmare. After all, any app with a decent user base will cram in everything: live streams, games, loans, videos, mini programs. They're stuffing everything but the kitchen sink into these apps. High memory usage is absolutely inevitable. I think for users who actually need to upgrade right now and require large storage capacity, it might be worth looking at some mid-range models released mid-last year. Take the Redmi K80 Ultra, for example, the OnePlus Ace 5 Pro, or the iQOO Z10 Turbo, or even previous gen flagships that have seen price cuts, while their battery capacities might be slightly smaller, since that is the biggest area of improvement for this year's models. At the time these older devices were released, supply chain prices for RAM and flash storage weren't nearly as outrageous. Plus, manufacturers are eager to clear out old inventory. Right now, the price for a 16GB plus 512GB config on those models is much more attractive. As for whether upcoming flagships will also be heavily impacted, I think it's inevitable. And on top of that, we have to factor in the rising costs of TSMC S2nm flagship SoC this year. This will lead to further polarization among new flagship phones. Either the price increases will be minimal, but with no significant upgrades in specs, or some features might actually see a downgrade. Word is also spreading that, for this year's flagships, some new models in the 4,000-24,500 yuan range will stick with 3nm platform chips instead of upgrading to the latest 2nm node. In plain English, some new phones won't use the latest flagship platforms. They'll opt for sub-flagship chips to keep costs down. Of course, this doesn't mean that upstream manufacturers of RAM and flash storage are seeing a huge spike in actual manufacturing costs, but rather today's major data centers and cloud computing platforms now require massive amounts of high-performance memory for AI. For suppliers like Hynix, Samsung, and Micron, producing the high-performance memory used in data centers yields a much higher profit margin than traditional DDR memory or mobile flash storage chips. So, they are prioritizing supply for data centers. Yet, they are reluctant to actively expand production capacity. And even if they did, scaling up takes time. Looking at it from another perspective, if it were possible to increase capacity in the short term, they would still prioritize supply for high-margin data centers. This indirectly squeezes the production capacity for consumer-grade products. As the saying goes, scarcity drives up value. Ultimately, this has led to a massive price surge across the RAM and flash memory supply chain. Regardless, 2026 is shaping up to be an incredibly tough year for both the smartphone and PC industries. In this era of the AI infrastructure boom, the price hikes for memory and storage look set to persist for quite a while. The days of dirt cheap mobile RAM are officially a thing of the past. So, how much RAM does your current primary phone have? Given the current market situation, do you plan to stay a nail user with your current device? Or will you bite the bullet and upgrade to a new one? Let us know in the bullet chats, or share your thoughts in the comments below.